So welcome everybody. After this process, we speak about, of course, the Awa Sake, the excellence of sparkling sake, and after all the work of the sommelier. And the last question will be how to present and sell sparkling sake in Europe, which is a very important point, I think. Just a few words before to see what is sparkling sake in first. In every day, Japanese sparkling sake is called just sparkling sake, or more precise, sparkling nihonshu. But the more technical terms are apo seishu or aposhu. We can see on labels sometimes the characteristic of aposhu. It means apo, effervescence, and fizziness. Confusingly, cheap low malt beer is also called aposhu, so be careful on the term. Another term to define the sparkling sake, this is awa sake. Awa means foam, and we will see it's an association of great producer for the excellence of sparkling sake. But both awa sake and apo seishu can be used to refer to all category of fizzy alcoholic beverages in Japan. In the history of sparkling sake in Japan, something very interesting, because we have a great honor here to have Mr. Suzuki from Ichinokura. And Ichinokura in Miyagi Prefecture was the first brewery in Japan to produce sparkling sake in 1998. Their famous Suzune is a slightly turbid, light, and off-dry sake. Radically different from the stereotypical sake from the 90s. It was marketed to appeal the new generation, so the women and the young people, and it's still today one of the most popular sparkling sake in Japan. So Mr. Suzuki, welcome here. It's a great pleasure to see you today. Maybe a first question for you, Mr. Suzuki, maybe the history of Ichinokura, the creation and the philosophy of the Kura.
じゃあ鈴木さん、最初に作画のなんか経営理念とかミッションとか歴史について話していただきたいです。
はい、ありがとうございます。Ichinokuraは、実はまだ新しい酒蔵で、実は50年前にここにある写真4つの小さな酒蔵が合併してできた酒蔵です。で4つが1つになってIchinokuraという名前で、新しいブリュワリーができたというのが50年前です。ですので、いろいろな新しいチャレンジをしていく、いろんな新しいチャレンジをしていく中で、このスパークリングのお酒というのも途中で開発したという経緯があります。
So, Ichinokura is a relatively new brewery, established 50 years ago when the merging of 4 other smaller breweries. And one of the new challenges which they are embarking on is sparkling sake.
Perfect. Thank you very much. We have a great story behind the first sparkling sake Suzune. And this story is absolutely amazing. Your father, Mr. Suzuki, Waro Suzuki, president of Ichinokura, went on a trip around Europe. In Paris, he first tasted a lambic beer that is very acidic and only mildly effervescent, more vinous, close to a wine, in fact, and very different from the dry and refreshing lager popular in Japan. So Mr. Suzuki find a new way of sparkling beverage in the lambic beer. After in Vienna, because he went in Paris to taste, and in Belgium to visit the brewery, and after he went in Austria, in Vienna, for the famous traditional seasonal beverage, the Federweiser in Vienna, in Austria, or a Sturm, like they say in Austria. It's a fresh, low alcohol wine that is still fermenting, and therefore cloudy and fizzy. Is it served like a beer? So we can say you drink a wine. It's a wine like we drink a beer, in fact. So it's very interesting. I think we have here the symbol of Ichinokura and the toji of Ichinokura. Mr. Suzuki, maybe can we talk more about your father, the idea of your father to create a sparkling sake, and the idea of this travel in Europe?
先ほどザビアさんがお父さんの最初にレンビックビアに出会えて、好きになってでもっとレンビックビアのような、スパークリング酒を作りたいというもっと経緯について話していただけますか。
はい、わかりました。ありがとうございます。この1980年のですね、最初のヨーロッパに視察旅行に行った時のこの出会いですね。パリでランビックのビールを飲んで、で、今度はウィーンでビールのようにガブガブ飲むフレッシュなワインにあってという流れで、私の父がそのままこの日本に帰ってきて、他の酒蔵と一緒に考えたのは、甘くて酸っぱい白ワインのようなお酒を作って、それを市場に出しました。で、甘い日本酒低アルコールの日本酒だったので、じゃあこれ甘いということは、これまた発酵させればスパークリングになるなということで、その時はシャンパーニュのようなスパークリングを作りたいと思って、でもう一度今度何年か経った後にヨーロッパに研修旅行に行った時に、これはあるコニャックのシャトーの方の紹介で、シャンパーニュをいろいろ視察するんですけれども、正直言って難しかったんですね。シャンパーニュ製法で日本酒でシャンパーニュ製法のスパークリングを作るというのは非常に難しいということで、私の父はそこでもうギブアップしました。諦めて、これは他の酒蔵の人から聞いた話だと、私の父はシャンパーニュの作り方非常に難しすぎてギブアップして、シャンパーニュの町の郊外の酒場でがっかりして酒を飲んでたそうなんです。で、その時に飲んでた酒が、その十数年前に出会ったランビックビールにまた出会ったんですね。で、それを飲んでた時に、改めてランビックビールのことをヒントに、逆に言うとこのランビックビールの製法を日本酒に応用してスパークリングを作ったというのが実はスズネの、できたきっかけになります。それからよくスズネもスパークリングなのでシャンパーニュのような日本酒だねっていう表現をよく周りから言われることはあるんですけど、実はスズネのはランビックスパークリングシャンパーニュではなくてランビックどちらかというとベルギーのビールを参考にして作り上げていった、ところです。私の父はシャンパーニュのような日本酒を作ろうと思ったけどギブアップしたと。でギブアップしなかったのがこの後お話になる永井さんだと。
永井さんですね。ちょっと訳しますね。はい、みんながずっと日本語を聞いてますからね。ちょっと英語に訳します。So Mr. Suzuki was just talking about the inspiration behind the Suzune, which his father received from a trip to Europe. So it all goes back to the 1980s, as written in the slide. So in 1982, his father's first trip to Europe, he drank lambic beer. My apologies. Those of you that don't know what that is, it's kind of like a kind of sweet. You can explain it better than me, Xavier, what a lambic beer is. But as written in the slide, it's a very acidic and only mildly effervescent. And then he went to Austria, and in Vienna, he drank a wine that is drunk like a beer. So instead of drinking it in wine glasses, it's a very fresh wine, and what he thought was he took this idea from this wine that he drank in Vienna. He thought he could produce something like that in Japan. And so they actually set about working on a sweet and sour wine, like a white wine, a sweet and sour sake. And that is how Himeizen came about, one of the other products in Ichinokura's lineup. And Himeizen, so it's sweet, it's sour, and it's low alcohol. If you were to do another fermentation, you could very easily create a sparkling sake. So that's what the objective was. And originally, his father, the Toji, actually wanted to create the sparkling sake using the champagne production method. And so he went back to Europe, and through a connection of a cognac chateau, he was able to go and visit many champagne wineries and see champagne being made. And he realized how difficult it is to make champagne. It's very, very complicated. And if he was to make this sparkling sake using the same method, the sake would end up being very expensive. And so basically what happened was he ended up giving up. The story, as it is told by other brewers of the time, is that he, after his visits to these champagne producers in France, he kind of he sort of ended up somewhere feeling very disappointed and started drinking something else. He started drinking a lembic beer, the lembic beer which he drank 10 years previously in 1982. And it was then that he received the inspiration for what became Suzune. So instead of creating it, a lot of people think that perhaps Suzune is made using the champagne method, but actually it's not. It's made using something closer to a lembic beer production method. It is Nagai-san, who we're going to speak to later on, Mr. Nagai, who actually makes sake using the champagne method. But Suzune is made using the lembic beer method.
And this is the famous Suzune. This is a bottle of Suzune. So inspired, as you say, from this beverage that challenge our perception of what beer or wine can be. He wanted to create a new kind of sake with Suzune that could transcend the established stereotype for that time, at the time when sake was still seen as old-fashioned. This led first to development of a refreshing low alcohol sake, and then the first sparkling Suzune. The name Suzune refers to the dinging sound from the small bubbles made in a glass. So maybe, Mr. Suzuki, two last questions for you from Suzune. Maybe just first of all to describe in few words the profile of Suzune in aromatic or in texture and mouth. And after, the second question with the market of Suzune, is it a specific domestic market or can we find Suzune outside Japan?
鈴木さん、2つの質問なんですけど、ちょっと1つずつ分けて、英訳したいんですけど、大丈夫ですか？
お願いします。
最初の質問は、質問っていうか、ちょっとスズネの、味わい香りを簡単に、ディスクライブは、していただきたいですね。食感とか香りとか味わい。はい。
ありがとうございます。まず最初にこのスズネ飲んでいただくと、非常にとても甘いタイプのお酒だということに気づいていただけると思います。これはとても甘口のワインに比べても非常に甘いという感覚があると思うんですけども、何も糖類を足したものではなくて、お米、原料のお米由来の甘さがそのまま残っているという自然な甘さを感じることができます。それから酸味ですね。これも酸も爽やかな酸とともに、あとスパークリングですので炭酸ガスの酸味で非常に爽やかな味わいになっています。で、特徴的な香りがあります。特徴的な香りとしては、お米で作っているにもかかわらず、ブドウのような香り、特に、 マスカットのような香りがするねというふうに表現をいただくことが多いです。で、先ほども教えていただいたのは、イタリアにもマスカットの甘口のスパークリングがあって、マスカットアスティというお酒があるそうですけども、それに非常に似ているねということで、教えていただきました。非常にカジュアルに飲んでいただける、アルコール度数は 5% しかありませんので、イージーに飲んでいただけるスパークリングの日本酒という味わいです。
酵母のことは、話していいですか？
酵母のこともいいです。酵母は
大丈夫ですか？いいでしょう。私してるから怖い
そうそう、
です。
リンゴさん、はい、お
はい。
願いします。
First of all, I mean, for those of you that have tasted this sake, I think you'll agree that it's quite sweet. Might be a bit of an understatement. Even compared to sweet wine, it's a lot sweeter. And all this sweetness comes from the rice, from the conversion of starch into sugar. There's no added sweetness or sugars. The acidity is very high, refreshing. You combined with gas, you get this lovely refreshing finish. The aroma, it has quite a particular aroma profile and something that you might not associate with rice necessarily. A lot of people tell Ichinokura that the aroma reminds them of something more like grapes or like a muscat. And they actually use it. This comes from the yeast, so it's an ester. It's an apple based, it's an ethyl caprate ester, which gives you these apple aromas.
Yeah.
But with the lower alcohol, it actually produces this more kind of like grape-like aroma. It's Brewing Society number 28 for those of you that know a bit about Sakeist. A little bit of a geeky fact for you. And we were just chatting before this session, and we realized that this Suzune is very similar in flavor profile to Muscat de Asti in Italy. Which is a very kind of affordable but very sweet sparkling wine. And in the same way, this is a casual drinking sparkling sake. This is something that you can just enjoy casually in the summer, perhaps just as a nice, refreshing drink.
It's a great comparison because for us in Europe, Moscato d'Asti is famous, of course, and European people love that. And to say and to know, Suzune, it's like a Moscato d'Asti, if we can compare, it's very interesting because, for example, for us in Terrace, in Paris or in Italy, there is many Moscato d'Asti. So interesting to know.
面白い比べですね。パリのテラスというエリアにはなんかマスカットでアスティはいろんな種類があって、たくさんねいろんなメーカーのものがあって、なんかそれ比べるのとなるとちょっと面白いですね。2番目の質問、sorry, Xavier.
Sorry. Suzune, is it available outside Japan or only in Japan?
その2番目の質問は、どこで販売してますか？国内の販売だけですか？それとも海外で販売してますか？どういう？
はい、ありがとうございます。今、写真で写っているのは、スズネの、瓶内二次発酵ではなくて、タンク内二次発酵、シャルマン方式みたいな形に似た作り方をしているもので、このタイプだけが今、輸出をしています。日本国内では、もともとのオリジナルの薄く白く濁ったタイプが日本ではメインなんですけども、これは輸出の向けに作っているスズネタイプ。これはフランスにも少しだけ行ってます。あとはイギリス、それからスペイン、アメリカ、あとはアジア各国ですね、に輸出は行っています。
これは、今輸出しているのは、ちょっと濁ってる、薄濁ってる方は、輸出してますよね。この
薄く濁っている方はですね、輸出はですね、サンフランシスコと香港にしか輸出はしてないんです。
わかりました。
はい。
So the photograph on the slide is of their Suzune product, which is made using the tank method, the Shamat method of
Okay,
sparkling winemaking.
yeah.
This is the only one really which they export. They're exporting this one to France, London, Spain, the US, all over Asia. They have another one which is kind of like more like a light cloudy type. They're only exporting that one to San Francisco and Hong Kong at the moment. It's mainly a Japanese product, Japanese-owned product.
And perfect. Thank you much. Thank you, Mr. Suki. Thank you much.
Thank you. ありがとうございます。
We continue with a few things to know about sparkling sake. So, why sake sparkling becoming very popular? Because sparkling sake has been around for many years, but there weren't many companies producing it. With the approaching of the Tokyo Olympics, Japan decided to promote sparkling sake as a Japanese champagne to offer a celebratory drink with the Japanese flavors for the gold medalists and for all the team of the Olympics. But for this reason, many sake companies introduced their own interpretation of the beverage. Some have even invited completely new ways to turn like sake into sparkling sake. Aside from this, people started to appreciate it as a tasty summer drink. This is important, this word. Sake sparkling became in Japan a tasty summer drink. Even the most enthusiastic sake lovers might switch to beer during the hot summer. So instead of drink beer, we can drink sake, sparkling sake, sorry, instead of beer. So it's interesting during the hot summer because they might want something bubbly and refreshing, and sparkling sake is more refreshing. Iced sparkling with a low alcohol percentage is just as a refreshing cold beer, so sake lovers can still enjoy the taste they like without the drink being too heavy. So it's not a heavy beverage, and that's why it's very popular. But one of the main questions is, how is sparkling sake made? And this is very important because just like sparkling wines, there are multiple ways to make sparkling sake, but they can broadly be divided in two categories. First category is the artificially carbonated, and the other one, the naturally carbonated. So the bubbles come from two different possibilities. First of all, this is the artificial carbonation. So by far the cheapest and easiest way to produce sparkling sake is to simply add CO2 to finished brew. Imagine like a giant soda maker that injects carbon dioxide into the sake. This is this method. The artificial carbonation is also how many cheap sparkling sake wines are produced. This method is not only easy and cheap, it also gives a broader control over the exact amount of carbonation. So with the natural, we don't have the exact amount, but with this method, we can add the exact amount. So, but the resulting beverage will have a relatively big bubble. So it's an intense bubble, full in bubble. So not delicate, it's a deep bubble. So this is a method. We had CO2 like that with gas, of course. So it's also worth noting that carbon dioxide is considered as an additive. So this kind of sparkling sake cannot be sold as tokutei meishoshu. It's not possible. So it's a specially designated sake. It must be sold as a regular sake, so like a food sushu. Even through the base sake might have otherwise qualified of junmai or ginju. However, in international market, these terms are sometimes used regardless of Japanese rules, so be careful. An example of this method, Mio from the giant Takara Shuzo is a fun and easy drinking sparkling sake made with this method. In Japan, you can find easy this beverage in all the store corner. In Europe, it's available in many Asian supermarkets or online. It's easy to find. But for more refined bubbly, we can go in a keigetsu with the John sparkling. So it's the same method. It's a dry sparkling sake, so not too sweet, very dry. This one from Thuizat Brewing Company. And the base on this method, it's a Junmai Daiginjo. So it's a Junmai Daiginjo where we had a carbonation, but more delicate, more elegant. So it depends, of course. But we have both sake in this category. And the other possibility for sparkling sake, this is a natural carbonation. So as mentioned, the carbon dioxide occurs naturally during the fermentation and can be trapped in the sake if the container, a tank or a bottle, is tightly closed. So two methods for that: the second fermentation in a tank and the second fermentation in a bottle, like in champagne in bottle. So the second fermentation in a tank, its name is the Sharma method. What is the Sharma method? The Sharma method begins like a traditional method with the creation of an uncarbonated base sake, so classic still sake on the base. This sake is mixed with a measure of kazu or rice koji, which will create sugar, the koji, water, and yeast. Then they put in a large stainless steel tank, a pressure tank, or an autoclave in this tank, as you can see. So we put both still sake with a kazu or rice koji, yeast, and water in this autoclave. And after the yeast and the koji cause a second fermentation in a closed tank, which held under pressure. So the carbon dioxide from the fermentation is forced into the sake, in fact. The second fermentation takes 1 to 6 weeks, after which the fizzy wine is immediately filtered and bottled. The dosage, so the sugar is added in bottling, and usually from a sweetness at 6 to 12 grams of sugar per liter. So what types of wine also are made using the Sharma method? So instead, outside the sparkling sake, we can produce Prosecco, Lambrusco, the Asti Spumante, and in Germany, the German sect. And many US sparkling wine are made by this Sharma method. So it's not only sake made with this method. I have something to say. It's an interesting way to propose sparkling sake because we have the freshness and we don't see the oxygen. So there is no oxygen during the process, and to preserve the freshness, it's a very good way, the Sharma method. After we have one of the most difficult method, the second fermentation in a bottle. So the method champenoise, champagne method. So just before, I would like to speak about wine for this method and after sake. So the best champagne and sparkling wine are made by the method champenoise, of course, which requires a second fermentary in a bottle. This second fermentation is accomplished by adding a mixture of sugar and yeast in the bottle. It calls a liqueur de tirage. So we put that in a still wine. This wine then is bottled and capped, so with caps, with a bottle cap similar to one found for the beer bottle. So it's not a cork to close the bottle, it's like a caps of beer. The yeast act on the sugar, and the resulting carbon dioxide remains trapped in the bottle. So quality sparkling wines are usually left on their yeast for several months. we can say it's close to 1 year, and after even up to 6 years, 10 years. So this is the autolysis of the yeast, and more we keep the yeast, the dyed yeast on the wine, more you have the toasty flavors, roasted flavors. Very interesting. At the end of this process, the cap is removed. It's a dégorgement and replaced with a traditional cork with a cage. But for the sake, it's a bit different. For the sake, you know that one of the first, we can say the first person in history who worked with this method is Mr. Nagai from Mitsubishi. And this is really the first person who studied the champagne method. Mr. Nagai, we can speak after with him, but it was the first we make a long travel to understand sparkling method champenoise. In sake brewing, addition of sugar is not allowed by the law. So we can't add sugar in the bottle. It's not possible in the law in Japan. So the brewers had to come up with different way to provide nourishment for second fermentation using only ingredients at hand. This process requires a lot of trial and error to get right. Some breweries have worked for years to develop and refine the right recipe to have this good carbonation, the right level of alcohol and the pleasant flavors at the same time. And this is a really hard and a very long way. I have maybe, Mr. Nagai, a first question for you with Christopher. We know you are the first who learned the method of sparkling in Champagne. First of all, when was your first travel in France, in Champagne? And after that, how many how many times you try to make sparkling sake? How long does it take?
永井さん、
はい
質問なんですけど、
はい。
永井さん、初めてシャンパン製法を、勉強してスパークリング酒を、作ろうとした、酒蔵という認識なんですけど、いつ初めて、シャンパン地方に行ったのはいつですか？そしてどれぐらいの期間の、試行錯誤でスパークリング酒の、作り方は、勉強したんですか？
はい。まずなぜそのスパークリングビンナ20発酵にトライをしようと思ったかっていうことをちょっとお話してもよろしいでしょうか。
はい。So he would like to start by explaining actually why he decided to study the secondary fermentation in the bottle method in the first place.
私が酒蔵に酒造りを始めたのは27年前なんですけど、その時衝撃的な業界に入った時に実は本当に一ノ倉さんの鈴音はもう本当に衝撃的な日本酒の一つでして、もう今歴史を聞いて我々がトライしようともう20年以上前にですね、本当にスパークリングにチャレンジしたことっていうのはもう本当に敬意を表します。それと同時にですね、こう横並びだったその酒にですね、本当になんとかこうその酒を変えたいなっていうのは自分も酒蔵に入った時思ってて、その時日本酒じゃないんですけどワインで衝撃的なワインに出会ってですね、実は DRC ロマネコンティのモンラッシェの1988年のワインに出会いまして、でこれを飲んだ瞬間に僕は稲妻が落ちるぐらい衝撃を受けてですね、もうそれは本当に入社した直後ぐらいです。でこんなような世界観の日本酒作りたいなと思って、実は最初にトライしたのが熟成の研究だったんですよ。ヴィンテージの研究を自分が27年前に始めました。ちょっとじゃあここまで。
はい、そうですね。わかりました。So, about 27 years ago, when he first entered the industry, Suzune was out there. It was a very, very big surprise when he tried Suzune. It was very popular. And he was thinking about like why people want to kind of drink these kind of sake in the first place. But actually, it was a wine which provided the first inspiration, if you like. So he tasted the Domaine Romani Conti, 1988 vintage, and he was taken aback. He was very shocked. It was like a lightning bolt had hit him, and he had this eureka moment, and that's when he started to his foray into research of aging sake.
Wow.
de、
It was a Montrachet, Mr. Nagai. It was a Montrachet, a white wine of Romane Conti.
うん、
モンラシェでしたね。
あ、モンラシ
確かに。
ェの、そう、モンラシェです。いやいや、
Which is the best, we can
Romane
say,
Conti,
most iconic wine in the world. Of
Yeah.
course.
Yeah. Okay.
で
じゃあ続けてください。
そうですね。それで、今一番長く研究しているのは、27年間ずっと研究し続けているのは、この日本酒の熟成を実は一番研究しています。で、その次に、実は自分の長い研究は、そのスパークリングの日本酒の研究をして、その10年も蔵入って10年ぐらい経った後ですね、やっと自分が酒造りとか全部理解して、自分の思うような形を作り上げられてから初めてこの熟成酒を売るためにどうしてもそのスターターとなるお酒が必要だというふうに思ってました。で、もちろん鈴音さんの作り方も今までの歴史的なスパークリング日本酒の作り方はもう相当研究はさせてもらったんですね。でも僕はやっぱりその中でもやっぱりスパークリング、ビールとかスパークリングワインの中でもやっぱりシャンパン製法っていうものにやっぱり一番トライアルしたいなと。で、5気圧を超える透明で、しかもクリアなで、火入れがしてあってちゃんと世界に物流ができるそんな状態の、スパークリング日本酒を作りたいと思ったのが2003年からスタートをしました。はい。
わかりました。じゃあ、その鈴音とか他の鈴音を作ったお酒の製法とかいろいろ見た後に、やっぱりちょっとシャンパンは
そうですね。
挑戦してみたいってことですね。
はい。
So, kind of the longest research that he ever did was the aging research. So that was about 27 years ongoing. And then the next longest would be the sparkling sake research. So after he'd been in the company about 10 years and he'd cut his teeth and he'd learned how to make, sake, basic kind of sake, he was able to make his own sake in his own way that he wanted to kind of craft in his own vision. And so he started researching, obviously he needed to work out how to make the starter sake, the sake that would become the starter for the sparkling sake. He did a lot of research. He looked at Suzune and other, historic methods of making the starter sake. But then he decided that he wants to make it using the champagne method, which uses the high pressure and, it's clear and can be pasteurized as well. And it was 2003 that he actually started the actual production itself.
2003年に志を持ってスタートしたのはいいんですけど、本当に参考になるもの、参考書がもう一切ない状態でスタートさせてもらいました。で、シャンパンのその理論的な本を数冊読んだんですが、本当にそのシャンパンの中で大きな製法の違いっていうのがもう知れば知るほど日本酒との違い、日本酒の製法との違いっていうのが分かって、そこがガス気圧5気圧を超えて透明なものっていうのがかなりハードルが高いっていうことにやればやるほどよく分かって失敗をそこでも繰り返してきました。後でこの話の具体的な話します。何が違う？
なるほど。高気圧の方が難しかったですね。
そうですね。
はい。Okay. So 2003 was the starting point, but he had started with no reference points whatsoever. He'd read some books about the theory of making champagne, but he realized that the biggest challenge that he faced was making the sparkling sake with the high pressure, and he wants to talk about that in more detail later on. But that was the biggest kind of challenge hurdle that he faced.
シャンパン製法と違うところ大きく3つございまして、それをご説明させてもらいます。
Right. So that there are three things which differ greatly between from the way that champagne is made in sake production.
まず一つ目が一次発酵が終わった後ですね。日本酒は何も中に足してはいけないということです。で、シャンパンは一次発酵終わった後に、テラージュ瓶詰めの時に、酵母と諸糖を入れて瓶内二次発酵を促すっていうことをしていいんですけど、日本酒はまずそれができないということですね。
これは説明しましたね。先の前のスライドで。
説明しました。はい。
そう、説明してあります。はい。
で、そうなると、やっぱりもう最初の瓶詰めの時期ところがすごく勝負になってきます。で、一つの目的は瓶内二次発酵を促して、ガス気圧を上げていく。で、もう一つの大きな役割はその味わいもそこでほとんど決まってしまうということ、瓶詰めの時にですね。ですので、2つのバランスを取らなければいけないということなんです。泡の質と味のバランスっていうのをもう並行して考えなきゃいけない、瓶詰めをしなきゃいけないというところですね。
So, as Xavier explained in the earlier slides, the law in Japan forbids breweries from adding anything to the sake after filtration. After the sake has been pressed or filtered, you're not allowed to add anything apart from water under Japanese law. So, this makes it extremely difficult. And also, actually, so before the filtration, although you are allowed to add extra alcohol, you're not allowed to add things like sugar or acidifiers if you want to, sell the sake as for tokute me shoshu or something like that. So it makes it very difficult to do what you do in France when you add the liqueur de tirage and sugars into the bottle to start the secondary fermentation. Also, so when you're making a sparkling sake, the biggest kind of battle starts in the bottling stage. This is when you start to increase the gas in the bottle. Yeah. Okay. It's also when the flavor profile of the sake is determined. And it's about striking a balance between the quality of the sparkling and the flavor profile. It's about getting that balance between those two. It's very difficult. Very complex, very difficult.
It's like Mr. Nagai, it's like the first man who go on the moon. It's a pioneer of the research.
なんか初めて月へ行った人みたいですよね。
いや、それ多分本当に地道なそんなかっこよくないんですけど、もう酒シャワーは何回も開けた瞬間にブワーって吹かれたりとかして、もう何百回って酒シャワーを浴びました。
なるほど。はいはい。爆発しました、ね。
爆発して、もう目は痛くなるわ。
なるほど、なるほど。It's nothing that cool. It's actually quite a kind of basic thing, but he ended up getting drenched in sake many times because the bottles would explode spontaneously during the gas would get too high inside the bottle and it would just...
で、あとシャンパンと違う濁り酒と透明なお酒のブレンディットなんですね。で、はい、シャンパンの瓶内二次発酵に必要な酵母って本当に瓶口に数ミリ、集めると本当に数ミリの量なんですけど、我々の濁り酒の中には酵母だけじゃなくやっぱり米の細かい織りがあるので、もう本当数センチの織りになってしまうんですね。ですので織りがあるっていうことはその分、デコルジュマンを織り引きをしたときにものすごいその織りとともにガスが抜けてしまうんですね。ですからそこの織りの量のバランスとその ガス気圧っていうのがものすごい何回も何回もやって、もう3年間で実はシャンパーニュにその後行くんですけど、シャンパーニュ行く前に3年間で500回失敗して、もう心が何回も折れて、もう何回もやめそうになりました。
So their sake is kind of like a blend between a nigori sake, which is the sake is filtered, but it's not filtered completely. So some of the solids, some of the sediment from the fermentation goes into the bottle, and then a clear sake, so your standard clear sake. And sake contains some residual yeast after the fermentation, about maybe a few millimeters. And it also contains something called ori, which is, I suppose in English you might call it fine lees. It's a very, very small sediment, which is particles of the yeast and other things like rice and koji as well. And the thing is that they have to remove this ori. And when they remove this ori, some of the gas escapes out of the bottle. So they have to it's a battle trying to keep the gas in the bottle, but disgorge enough ori from the sake as well. And he tried maybe 500 times. He failed. And he kind of lost heart and he was going to give up. He really, I thought that was it. But somehow he found the strength to continue and succeeded.
I just put this picture maybe to explain at the same time the dégorgement. So what you said. Yeah. Thank you.
Yeah, that's good. Yeah, that's good. どうぞ。
それで2003年から2006年までですね、もう3年間で500回失敗して、もう、諦めかけた時に、で自分はやっぱりスパークリングワインの中でもやっぱシャンパーニュが一番優れてると思ったので、じゃあ自分もそのシャンパーニュに、1ヶ月ぐらい研修に行ったんですけど、行ってもし何もヒントが発見できなかったら、まあ諦めるかと。もう排水の陣でですね、もうそういう気持ちでもうフランスのシャンパーニュ地方に行かさせていただきました。でその時に温かく迎えてくれたメゾンの皆さんですね、あとはシャンパーニュ地方の皆さんはもう今でも感謝しておりますけど、本当に3つのメゾンに滞在させていただいて、特に一つのメゾンは1週間ぐらい現場でも作業をちょっと一緒にさせてもらったので、もう本当に今でもその体験が全て今につながっているかなというふうに思ってます。
何の気持ちですか？排水の
排水の陣でもう排水の陣ですね。もう自分を追い込んでも最後のそれを成し遂げるための成し遂げるために最後にチャレンジするっていう感じで、もうそれがもうできなかったらもう諦めるぐらいの覚悟で。
ラストチャンスですね。
ラストチャンスだと思います。
Last try. Okay, so from between 2003 and 2006, he kept at it 500 times. He tried, and just as he was about to give up, yeah, that's a lot of times, a lot of trial and error, and he was just about to give up. But then he thought, if champagne is the ultimate form of sparkling wine in France, in Europe, I should go to the Champagne region, and I should at least try and find some clues as to how I might be able to pull this off. And so he thought, okay, I'm going to go to Champagne. And if I can't find any hints during this trip, then that'll be it. Then I'll give up. So he spent some time with 3 maisons in the Champagne region, and about a week each. And he joined the production of each one. And really, it's the experience and the knowledge and the things that he learned during that time that really tied everything together in the end. So he was really, really thankful to the maisons that he visited that gave him the guiding light to find the answer to creating his sparkling sake.
Great. it's a long story and a very inspired story because we can say everything is possible. If we want to do that, we can do that. But
Yeah.
it was a long way. So again, Mr. Nagari, congratulations for this amazing job and this amazing research, I can say.
ね、成功できて、できたことはおめでとうございますね。
ありがとうございます。
はい。
まずそこはちょっとストーリー続くんですけど、
はい。
ちょっとだけ話していいですか？
はい、どうぞどうぞ。His story continues. Is he okay to continue for a little bit more, Xavier?
Yeah, of course. Every time.
もちろん。
それで、その蔵に行った時にものすごいヒントがあって、で、もうそれで持ち帰ってきたのが一つと、で、それでそこから、さらに200回失敗して、最終的には2008年に、完成してます。で、それまではもう本当にトライアンドエラーで、もうそこからはもう結構こう順調にっていうか、目標を持ってこう順調にトライアンドエラーが繰り返されて、最後にこだわったのはやっぱり泡の質ですね。ただのガス気圧の 5気圧を超えるっていうのではなくて、日本酒から生まれる泡がいかに日本酒とくっつきながらというか、味を引き立てながら泡のきめ細かさを表現していくかっていうことに、そこまでやっぱり最後の200回の中でトライすることができました。
So of course, the hints that he received during his the answers, the insight that he received during his time in those maison, that was kind of the first step. Then he actually had 200 more fails before he succeeded. And it was basically just, layer after layer of trial and error. And he steadily started to make progress. But then towards the end, it kind of became more of a question of not just reaching the necessary pressure level for that particular sparkling style, but also creating a type of bubbles that actually interacts in kind of the correct way with the other elements in the sake. How those bubbles kind of tie into the overall flavor profile and produce something kind of like detailed, like a fine kind of flavor profile. So fine bubbles, yeah, trying to create those kind of like fine bubbles that you get in his sake.
それで本当に2008年から今年でもう13年目が迎えますけど、毎年自分のチャレンジングは前の年の、自分が作った水芭蕉ピュアっていう商品ですけど、その水芭蕉ピュアを毎年超えていくというのが自分のチャレンジングで、本当去年クラマスターでスパークリング部門ナンバーワンになれたのは本当に何よりもフランスの皆さんに、認めてもらった賞っていうのを一番自分の中で取りたかった賞の一つなので本当に嬉しかったです。
So he finally succeeded in 2008. It's been about 3 years since then. And every year he tries to better the product that he created. So the sparkling sake is Mizu Basho Pure. That was the first one. And every year he's trying to create something better than that, something higher quality. And one of the awards that he really wanted to receive was, or one of his other achievements that he had was to receive recognition in France. So he was very, very happy to get the Kuramaster award. That's kind of the mark of success for him.
であともう一つシャンパーニュに行ってすごく勉強になったのがシャンパン委員会の存在だったんですね。でシャンパン委員会っていうのは本当シャンパンの品質とかブランドをいかに、サスティナブルに、未来につなげていくかっていう委員会を目の当たりにしてこれは日本の酒造組合なんていうもんじゃないなっていうのをすごく感じてそれに近いような組織を日本で僕作りたいの思ったのが青酒協会の前身になります。はい。 まあそこまでレベルまでまだ全然到達してないんですけど、でも目指すのはシャンパン委員会とちゃんと肩を並べられるような組織に、泡酒協会をしていきたいなと思ってます。
And he was really impressed by the Champagne Association. Is that the right word to use for that? Xavier? Yeah, and so he wanted to, he realized that one of the reasons why champagne had become, kind of the ultimate form of sparkling wine and why it was so revered was largely because of this association. And he wanted to create, it reminded him of the association that they have in Japan for sake, the sake brewing association. And he wanted to create one for sparkling sake, and that kind of became the beginning of what is now the Bubbly Sake Association, Awasake Kyokai.
Yeah.
Well, it's not quite on the same level yet as the Champagne Association, but
oh no, but it's different because we don't have to compare both associations. One is so we have also in Champagne the Comité de Champagne, which propose the rules of production, the regulation. But I think Awasake it's one of the greatest association of great producer. So no, we can't compare. It's not necessary champagne is better. No, absolutely not. No.
まあそんな比べる必要はないんですよ。やはりちょっと役割は違うし、もう全然比べる必要はないです。大丈夫です。But he really wanted to create an association which kind of could stand, beside the Champagne committee.
But it will be interesting because we will speak about Awasake in a few minutes with Mr. Nagai, and we will maybe learn more about Awasake in a few minutes. Perfect. Thank you much, Mr. Nagai. So just to recap, because we saw both methods, the Charmat and the method champenoise from Mr. Nagai-san, but what is the difference between both? In the process, the Charmat, so you understand now, use a second fermentation in a large stainless steel tank to trap carbonation in wine. In method champenoise, it's inside the bottle. But in terms of carbonation, the method champenoise yield a strongest carbonation. Charmat method wine or sake offer a softer carbonation and that dissipate more quickly. In the champagne method, we keep the bubble in the glass for more long time. With the Charmat method, in fact, when we serve the wine in a glass, it's true, the bubbles can be dissipate in a few seconds. In terms of sweetness, the Charmat method tend to be more sweet with this method than the method champenoise. So this is due to the stylistic choice by the maker rather than an inherent difference in the production method. And the price, of course, the Charmat method wines are less expensive to make like a method champenoise because the Charmat method use less labor and aging time like a method champenoise. So this is a very important thing to know between both methods. And the other possibility, because we have another possibility, a different approach to make these two different sakes, they are blended and bottled. One has been filtered and pasteurized. The other is only really filtered nigori and unpasteurized, with still active yeast and microorganisms inside the bottle. So the end of the fermentation will be inside the bottle. This is the ancestral method, or pétillant naturel in France, we say pet-net. One of the specialists of this method, so the end of fermentation, the primary fermentation in bottle, this is Masumi. Masumi proposed this sparkling sake with a end of fermentation inside the bottle, and this is very interesting. So it's not a second fermentation in the bottle. This is the primary fermentation. So the Morumi finish the fermentation inside the bottle. It's very interesting to know, and this is very different. After this method process, we now speak about the excellence of sparkling sake, the Japan Awazake Association. Here we promote different things. And as Mr. Nagai said, Champagne has a reputation as the highest quality and the most prestigious sparkling wine in the world. And Champagne is one of the world's biggest importers of champagne. So it's interesting to see that the Japanese sake brewers wanted to create a sparkling sake to match with champagne and to give an answer to champagne in Japan. A number of breweries has come together under the umbrella of Awazake in 2017 to further promote and development the sales of high quality sparkling sake. So together, these breweries, they agreed on a list and of a strict rules to ensure a high quality. First of all, the main quality, and after that, after these rules, I can maybe talk with Nagai-san why these rules. But the rules number one, created from only rice malt, and water. Junmai and rice polish ratio are not stipulated. Used and grade above 3 by the agricultural produce inspection law as raw material. So a good rice to start, a good domestical rice. Rules number 3, the preservation of only carbon dioxide, which stem from the natural fermentation during the brewing. The second fermentation, and it's very important, is within stipulation whether occurred inside the tank and bottle. So it's not necessary a second fermentation in a bottle. It can be Awazake, a second fermentation in a tank. Outward appearance is clearly transparent, and bubble from after is in it is uncorked and poured. Alcohol content is 10 degrees or more, not less, and gas pressure is 3.5 bars on more than 20 degrees to measure this pressure. So maybe Mr. Nagai-san, how many? So to create these rules of Awazake, how many breweries speak with you to decide of that?
中井さん、この泡酒協会のルールを決めるためにどれぐらいの数の蔵元が集まったでしょうか。
立ち上げメンバーが、約、理事メンバーが8人なんですけど、そのうちの半分ぐらいのメンバー、4、5人でですね、約1年半から2年かけて、そのルール決めを決めました。で、その時今、国税、今、中央会の方に今移られてますけど、宇都宮先生が種類技官でいらっしゃいまして、国税庁のですね。で、宇都宮先生に、国際的な日本初のその、スパークリングチームを作るとしたら、どういうルールがいいですかっていう相談をしながらですね。で、3.5 っていうのは、その良質な EU のワイン法のですね、良質なスパークリングとか、あとアルコール度数も10% っていうのは、そこと比較しながら、実は、基準を決めさせていただきました。
皆さんが、全員、ちょっと途切れたりして、すみません。
宇都宮先生がね、我々の作ってきたものを、まあ、比較、見ていただいて、監査していただいたって感じですかね。はい、
そうですね。はい。
うん、
So the Awazaki Association started with 8 breweries, or 8 people, and for about 4 or 5 of those members, over about 2 years, they set about deciding the rules, and they received some guidance from Mr. Utsunomiya, who is you know him, yeah. The Japan Sake and Shochu Makers Association. So he actually made a lot of comparisons with sparkling wine when determining the pressure and to achieve the best quality, basically. So trying to match the specification of high quality sparkling wine in France and other parts of Europe when determining the rules for sparkling sake in Japan.
Perfect. And this is very high level rules because we can see it's very close to a drastic rules from champagne. So very interesting. Furthermore, they state that aroma and quality should remain the same for 3 months or more at room temperature, and the sparkling sake must be pasteurized. The association has also trademarked the term awazake, at least in the mixed Roman Japanese form awa sake. So it's a double writing, I can say, to further distinguish the products from the many mass-produced sparkling sake on the market. So it's really a label, a brand, we can say. It's a brand. This is Zokura. So we know most of them. All are very famous. Of course, made by Mizubasho, but we have Nikiichi, Kokoryu, Uzume, Akashitai. So Masumi here. Shichiken is here, of course. Shichida. So many great high-level producer of Japanese sake. Yutsushika is here also. They are here in this philosophy of high-level sake. So for them, I think it's very easy to follow this rule. I have a question from Mr. Nagai. Just one question, very quickly. How do you decide to have a new member of Awazaki? Is there a specific selection, or how do you do it?
永井さん、新しいメンバーの、選び方、新しい酒蔵がどうやって青崎協会に入るでしょうか。
基本もう我々その製品の基準を出してますので、その基準を満たしている酒蔵の酒を持ってる蔵、またそこを持ってなくても目指そうと思っている意思のある蔵は加盟はできるようになってます。ただその認定するのはその基準を満たすお酒を第三者機関に分析をガス気圧とかアルコール度数とか、あと費用値菌検査をしたりとか、あとはその、炭酸ガスを加えてないかっていうのも実は分析をかけて、で自然の発酵であるっていうことを証明したもの、品質的に証明された数値的にも証明されたものだけ認定種として、年に2回認定をして、青崎協会の認定種として販売をしております。
So, any brewery which meets the standards of the association or is trying to meet the standards of the association can become a member. But there are actually, you have to actually receive a certification as well as just becoming a member of the association. There are two, or rather to become a member of the association, I should say. And there are two kind of chances every year to receive this certification. And what happens is a third party, the brewery actually has their sake inspected by a third party. The sake is analyzed. They analyze the gas level and making sure that there's no hyochi bacteria, which is a type of lactic acid bacteria, which actually damages the sake, and then making sure that there's none of that in the sake, making sure that the quality, is at the same kind of meeting the standards of the association. So to actually be certified, this takes place twice a year, and the brewery must actually receive this certification to be able to become a member.
I understand. Perfect. Thank you very much. Thank you. Breweries have to document the brewing process and the raw materials they use, and are inspected twice a year to ensure that all regulations are being followed. So you're right.
So sorry, this happens for all the members. So whether you're becoming a member or not, everyone who is a member of the association has to go through this inspection twice a year. Yeah.
Okay, understand. The finished product is also inspected by the external laboratory to measure the gas pressure, as you said, alcohol content, and even the composition of the carbon dioxide, to be sure that it's not an artificial CO2.
He did say that they make sure that no gas has been added into the
absolutely 100% natural. If a product meets all standards, the bottles are marked with a hologram seal that guarantees the authenticity and quality of this awazake. You can feel this, you can see these holograms here, the awazake, sparkling sake here, for example, that passes the strict inspection, get an holographic sticker. So easy to find. Behind the bottle, you can see if you have this hologram sticker, it's a pure awazake. With this push of premium quality, the Awazake Association wants to clearly distinguish their product from the many rather simple and sweet sparkling sake at the lower end of the market, some of which can also claim to be naturally carbonated, often via second fermentation in tank. Despite the strict rules, there is a lot of stylistic variation among the association members' products. An example here, Akai-sen from Niigata produced a clean and elegant awazake that fits very well into their portfolio of classic Niigata style sake. While Shichiken has experimented with aging and use whiskey barrels from Century Akushu Distillery, which is a few kilometers close to Shichiken, to create complex and luxurious sparkling sake. It's a part of creativity in sparkling sake. So it's interesting also. And these two are two big symbols of awazake, Shichiken and Akai-sen, so it's interesting to know that. In Europe, the selection of high-quality sparkling sake is still quite small, and even bigger brand can be difficult to find. But that will certainly change as sake in general becomes more popular all over the world. Mr. Nagai, you talk about a sentence very interesting. Nagai-san say, hope that one day people all over the world choose sparkling sake to make celebratory toasts. Probably yes, because the things can be changed, and I totally agree with you, Mr. Nagai. To make a toast with sparkling sake, it's a very, very good idea, of course.
Thank you.
Maybe we can maybe have a question at the end if many person have question of sparkling awazake, and maybe we can make an answer after. I don't have question here. Not for the moment, but maybe if we have question of that.
We have one question.
Minato-san, yes.
Yeah.
Maybe you can ask this question to Mr. Nagai if
Okay.
you want to make an answer.
Let's see. Interesting age now contemporary. なんか永井さん、そのジョーズアルコールの話だと思うんですけど、ジョーズアルコールをバリックで熟成して、なんかレスペリットでコンニャクみたいに使うのはどうでしょうか？アイディアとして。
あれですか？泡酒にっていうことですか？
そうですね。Can we clarify, Xavier?
But I think it's not because Minato-san said to age the brewing sake because Esprit de Cognac, this is the third distillation of cognac, so it's a high level spirit in cognac, and we had that in the liqueur.
It's a liqueur de tirage.
Yeah, but I think it's not allowed.
No, it's not allowed. It's not allowed in making. Oh, actually, they then.
But there is an interesting question in sparkling sake. Can they use a Solera system? So a blend of vintages,
like a sherry.
Yes, like that. Yeah, for example.
Well, I know that they use it for awamori. Sake's cousin, one of Sake's cousins.
Yeah.
They use it in awamori production. I'll ask. So it's possible before filtering. So 源さんが聞いてるのは、そのリクーデタラージの話なんだけど、そもそも日本では添加できませんからね、追加できませんから、絞る前に追加は特定名称酒だったらダメですけど、普通酒だったらできますよね。少しね、なんか別の醸造アルコールを加えることはできるんですけど、特定名称酒でも醸造アルコールを加えることはできるんですけど、どうですかね。ちょっと難しいですよね、このスピリットコンニャク。
そもそも泡酒はアルテンができないので、アルテンしたお酒は泡酒から外れちゃうんですよね。
そうですよね。そうですね。そう。
スパークリングなんで、ちょっと泡酒とはちょっと違う。
So, yeah, you can't actually make the alcohol added sake into sparkling sake. It's not allowed. And liqueur d'expedition, Xavier, that's basically the same thing, isn't it? Adding the...
Yeah, of course. Yeah. After we have liqueur de dosage, but it's for... but liqueur d'expedition and the tirage is the same. Absolutely.
It's the same thing. Yeah. You can't do it. I'm sorry. できない。法律上ではこれはちょっとできないです。Okay. So what were we talking about after that? I lost it. Sorry. Oh, yeah, Solera system. 永井さん、これはザビエルさんからの質問ですけど、
はい。
シェリーを、作るときに使う、熟成システムなんですけど、ソレラはご存知でしょうか？若いものを、一番なんか古いものにこう加える。こうなんかこういろんなレベルがあるんですけど、その違う熟成段階でこう加えたりするこう前のやつを下にやつ入れるとか、そういう泡盛を作るときに使いますよね。同じような熟成のそう。お酒でもどうでしょうかっていうザビエルからの質問。
実はその そのやっぱり、ヴィンテージの古いものと新しいものですね、ある程度、寝かした状態のブレンディットってすごく面白いと思っていて、実際僕もトライアル実はしております。
なるほど。
はい。で、かつそのちょっとウォークダルのようなものにもちょっと熟成の研究をしているので、まだちょっと詳しいことはこれ以上は言えないんですけど。
まだまだ結果が出るまではね、ちょっと、わかりました。So, Mr. Nagai is aware of this type of aging. Perhaps not the Solaris system itself, but the type of aging. And he is actually already trying something similar in a respect, because he is trying to blend or add the old sake to the new sake. Very old sake to the new sake. And so he was doing kind of experiments like that. He's also trying to age in vodka casks as well. He can't really give any more details because it's kind of just in the experimental stages.
Of course.
But he looks forward to reporting in more detail.
Great. So now we change a bit the side because we go in the way of promotion with the work of the sommelier after the production. We will see here how consider the different type of sparkling sake in terms of service, selling or proposition to the guests, and in terms of pairing. Interesting also, right? In terms of service, for the artificial carbonation, so we can serve at 8 degrees to preserve freshness because there is many bubbles, big bubbles. So more the temperature is low, more we have the sensation of maybe less big bubbles, and a close and long flute to preserve the numerous bubble. If we have a glass too open, we lose this numerous bubble, and the goal here is to have these bubbles. The service for the second fermentation in bottle or in the tank, serve at 10-12 degrees to open the flavors. This is the opposite, and smell well the complexity because of more complexity in this kind of sparkling. Serve in a glass of white wine for a better expression. Here we have a vintage 2009 from the Mizubasho Pure, and this is interesting to see the glass. This is a really interesting glass for tasting, to follow the complexity of the wine, to discover something new flavors, and to have a more expression, because oxygen is very interesting with this kind of glass. And we have here a glass from Philippe James, another ambassador of Awazaki this year. We have more large open glass when we have a great opening and a great complexity. We need oxygen for this kind of sparkling sake. Yeah. and Mr. Nagai used this kind of glass, and we made a testing with him with this glass, and it's absolutely fantastic. So I invite you in Japan, in Europe, to use this glass for sparkling sake, Awazaki. It's absolutely fantastic, and it tastes so different. It's a great experience. And for the ancestral method, so the end of the first fermentation in the bottle, we serve at 10 degrees. We can consider like a still sake, and we use a nut choco. It's a immediate pleasure, so not complexity here. But the different proposition for the guests. For the artificial carbonation, it's a festive sake. So has an initiation to sake, invitation to the female public or young public in a bar or on a pavilion terrace, of course. So this is the first step for the sparkling sake. Here's the artificial carbonation. For the second fermentation in bottle or in a tank, we can consider Awazaki like a gastronomic experience. It costs these bottles a bit high, it's normal because there is many work. So we have to promote it with a technical way to justify the price. And I speak here to the professional. When a guest pay a high price, we must to propose and to promote a high service and a high justification here, technical. And we need a sommelier for that. For the ancestral method, it's between a sake and a sparkling sake, so close to an organic way because of the yeast present in the bottle. So it's a kind of natural way. The fermentation system, so we feel this fermentation, and it's a real experience for the sense. So we have the storytelling here for the ancestral method. In terms of pairing, so for the artificial carbonation, it's like an aperitif for few tapas, a cocktail, for example, an easy way, but a gin fizz with sparkling sake is very interesting. We have a good result with this kind of sake with the gin. The second fermentation in bottle and tank, a great place. I choose for you today a dish from Mr. Jean Sulpice, a 2 Michelin star in France, famous, with a langoustine, green apple, and verbena. It's absolutely amazing. And I tasted this dish with Mizubasho Pure, and it was absolutely amazing. We have a great combination. The langoustine with the texture of langoustine was absolutely amazing. And with the ancestral method, we have a great pairing with the spring and enjoyable starter, a blend of freshness and creaminess to balance the cloudy fish sake here, and asparagus. Cream of agrumes. It's a simple and sharp dish, but very, very interesting with this kind of sparkling sake. But now, how we can introduce and sell sparkling sake in Europe? We have 4 things for me very important. First of all, it's necessary to present this new aspect, which always attracts young and dynamic clientele. The young and dynamic guests love this kind of new things, and it's a new thing. It's audacious beverage. Sparkling sake is a drink halfway between tradition and modernity. We know sake, Japanese sake, it's a pure beverage of tradition. But here with sparkling sake, we are between the tradition and between the modernity. It's a specific thing for the sparkling sake. And I think this is Japan. The food in tradition, but the soul in modernity. After the digestible, fresh, refreshing aspect and dry aspect is very important to drink and for a new drink in Europe. Now, the guests in Europe don't want something heavy and something too sweet. It's important to preserve the new aspects of drinking wine and drinking beverage in Europe. It's to keep the freshness. The digestible beverage. In a restaurant, we want that, for example, to sell a wine by the glass, we want something refreshing and something pure. It's very important. Sugar is, in my opinion, more suitable for the mixology market, at the opposite. In a restaurant, we will sell dry sake, dry sparkling sake, but for the mixology or the cocktail, we want something more sweet to make more pairings and to have more possibilities with the bar and with the cocktail way, the cocktail works. One of the most new thing important in the world of sparkling sake, this is the world renowned chef Alain Ducasse has collaborated with the Japanese sake brewery Chichigan in Yamanashi to create a sparkling sake to complement his cuisine. This is very interesting to see Alain Ducasse, a great chef, create a sparkling sake. And it's a great news, a fantastic news, because I think with that, with this kind of person, Alain Ducasse, sparkling sake are really now at the beginning of a great story. on a table, on a bar, on a terrace. That's great. And we wish just a long life to sparkling sake, of course. Maybe I have some question after, but maybe to finish, we can maybe answer the question, and after some few words from Mr. Nagai-san and Mr. Suzuki-san to finish. I asked to the question, but maybe if Mr. Suzuki-san or if Mr. Nagai-san you want to complete, it's possible. First question from Mr. Oe in France. I ever tasted sparkling sake for several times, but the plate about my impression overall was sweet. Do you consider dry sake match sparkling? Yes, of course. And just I said before, sweet sparkling sake are more interesting for terrace or aperitif or cocktail, but to make a pairing with cuisine, we need a dry sparkling sake. So I trust in dry sparkling sake for the pairing with the cuisine. It's absolutely essential. From Mr. Minatomo from Fukuju, sorry, in Japan, what do you see the potential of sparkling sake which are blended of different age sake? So Mr. Nagai, I think have an answer of that. He tried to do something like that, especially in terms of the consumer preference in the Western markets and pairing. Of course, Mr. Minatomo, I'm sure in terms of pairing, the fact to blend different age sake, it's possibly a great idea because we can, I think, have more complexity, more possibility to make link with meat, to make link with a creamy dish, not necessarily with the starter, with fish and shellfish, but this complexity can be interesting, but I think for the technical reason, it will be complex, but I know Mr. Nagai is working on that. So maybe in the future. I don't know when it will be possible to taste, but I think it's a great possibility for the future. The positioning of Awazake in the market where the traditional fizz champagne has existed for a long time. So as you see, Mrs. Fujita, thank you for your question. Sparkling Awazake, it's a young association from 2016, but I think the position of Awazake is clear to be a high level, like in Champagne. I think maybe Mr. Nagai, if you want to complete, maybe Christopher, can you explain to Mr. Nagai to complete this question or to give an answer to Mrs. Fujita?
じゃあこの、this third question, right?
The third, yeah, the third.
Right.
Maybe Nagai can make
中井さん、この3番目の質問答えていただけましょうか。なんかもう昔からなんですかね、
はい、
なんか普通の伝統的なスパークリングシャンパン、普通のなんか炭酸ガスが入ってるワインが昔から存在している市場でどういう位置づけになりますでしょうか、泡酒の方。
泡酒と僕はスパークリングワイン、シャンパンはもうバッティングしないと思ってます。っていうのはまず原料が、米とグレープで全く違うのでだから逆になんかお互いが補うというか特にこのシャンパンが苦手な食材だったりそういうものが逆に日本酒だから具体的に言うと、さっきも出てきましたからアスパラガスとか魚卵系のウニ、イクラ、キャビアはどっちともこう合うような気がしますけど、そういう魚卵系のもの、あとはその卵料理とか生野菜とか、そういうところっていうのは非常に泡酒が非常にこうカバーできるし、逆に 我々持ってないもの、やっぱり強い酸味とか、華やかな香りとかっていうのは、もう逆にシャンパンが持ってるので、だからもう一緒のテーブルで、すごく親和性があるんじゃないかなっていう僕は思ってます。両方楽しめるんじゃないか。
So, in Mr. Nagai's opinion, Awazaki can stand on its own in the market with champagne because champagne brings a lot of different qualities to the table, but it also is missing a lot of different qualities at the table as well. We saw how asparagus pairs really well with Awazaki, and perhaps you struggle a little bit with champagne. So, in a way, Awazaki is compensating. The qualities of Awazaki can compensate or fill in the gaps left by champagne at the table, and they can both coexist and kind of they both kind of provide something that the other doesn't, right? So if it's about high acidity and high aroma, you're not going to go to Awazaki for that. You're going to go to champagne. But there are other qualities that sake can bring to the table which champagne can't. And that's how they can coexist together.
Number 4, the difference of taste between this fermented with champagne method and Chardonnay method. So I asked before Mr. Shoji, but I can maybe show you again this. So it's more sweet with Chardonnay method, and it's more delicate and dry with champagne method. What do you characterize Awazaki and other sparkling sake compared to champagne? So we say it's more, so the first of all, Awazaki, it's 10 degrees alcohol minimum, and we have 3.5 pressure minimum in the sparkling. So in terms of taste, it's more dry and more pure Awazaki to compare for the other sake. And from Singapore, we have Mr. Seki. Will sparkling sake widely be consumed in the world? Like with champagne, of course, we hope. And I think it would be a question from Mr. Suzuki. Mr. Suzuki, maybe Christopher, maybe Suzuki can maybe answer if you want.
So let's see. Will sparkling sake widely consumed in the world likewise? Do they mean like champagne, do you think? So will sparkling sake be consumed like on the same level as champagne? I don't quite understand the question, Xavier. Can you help me here? Does it mean
will sparkling sake widely be consumed in the world like with champagne? So I think Mr. Seki wants to know if it's possible to drink sake, sparkling sake all around the world. And after this question, I have another one from Mr. Suzuki.
Okay.
Maybe
let's do this one first, and then we'll come back. We'll come back to that. じゃあ鈴木さん、この6番目の質問ですけど、シンガポールにあるいる関という人からの質問ですけど、シャンパンと同じように。スパークリング酒は、世界で広がる可能性が、あると思いますか？同じように楽しめる可能性があると思いますか？
そうですね。十分にあると思います。特に永井さんなんかもよくおっしゃってますけれども、世界中で何かお祝いの時の乾杯のお酒にとにかく日本が関係しているものであれば、この日本酒のスパークリングで乾杯をしていただくというのが当たり前になると思います。おそらく、皆さんテレビで見ることになると思いますけど、今年のオリンピック、せっかくですから日本酒を見ながらテレビで日本酒を飲みながらテレビで応援してほしいですし、きっと皆さんの国の方が金メダルを取ったらこのスパークリングの日本酒でお祝いをしていただければと思います。
Yeah, absolutely, definitely. There is definitely that potential. Particularly for celebrations related to Japan. So, for example, we have the Olympics coming up this year.
Yeah.
Wouldn't it be great if everyone sat in front of the television and watched the Olympics with a glass of sparkling sake in hand? So for celebrations, particularly those that are related to Japan, definitely, I think sparkling sake is a perfect beverage to enjoy at that time. Yeah.
Of course.
Does that
Thank
answer
you.
the question? Yeah. Does that answer the
Maybe
question?
I have the sixth question, but maybe if you have maybe other question, with pleasure. For me, it was an amazing possibility to speak with Suzuki-san and Nagai-san about sparkling sake. It's a great adventure. I hope you, all the public here today, or the person with us, enjoy this explanation about sparkling sake, and now are curious to taste sparkling sake. And for me, it's a fantastic, I can say, weapons of upselling in a restaurant. It's very easy to promote sparkling sake because it's a new beverage, delicate, refreshing, elegant. So now all the sommeliers of France, of Europe, America, Asia have to promote sparkling sake in the restaurants. For the aperitif, for the starters, we have many possibilities, and for the things to finish, this is a surprise for your guests. You try something new and you want to come back in your restaurant after. So trust in sparkling sake. It's a fantastic beverage.
そう、これだけちょっと追訳しますね。秋月さん。さっきザビエさんが言ってた、実際に今回の、スパークリングサケのウェビナーができて、いろいろまた勉強になったわけですけど、これからいろんなスパークリング酒、泡酒を、飲むのは楽しみにしてます。で、また、実際にお酒を、売る際というか、ソムリエが、酒を紹介する際に、やはり爽やかな味わい、もあるし、上品な味わいもあるし、新しいものですね。新しいものだから、実際に紹介しないとダメですね。なんかね、食前酒として、食中酒として、食後酒でも、やはり実際に紹介していかないと、みんなは発見しないので、それがすごく大事かなって思います。
Maybe Anna, you want to add something here?
You're on mute, Anna.
You're
on mute.
So thank you for Xavier-san, Suzuki-san, and Nagai-san for joining us today. And I hope all of you find the extraordinary story, how it was so difficult, but at the same time, it's so beautiful and wonderful, the sake sparkling is.
Yeah.
We hope. So thank you all of you. And if you have any question, you can send email to contact@sakeist.com email. Then we will reply to your question later on. Also, we have a couple of questions here so if you have any, even a couple of time or a couple of minutes, please answer and submit your answer to the questions. Thank you very much. 皆さん、かなり時間は押しましたけれども、ご参加いただきましてありがとうございます。そして、今回の特別ゲスト、一ノ倉鈴木社長と永井修造の永井社長にご参加いただきまして、スパークリング日本酒が、これだけ日本でも身近になりましたけれども、本当はどうやって誕生して、そして、今に広く知られるような泡酒も、開発のきっかけからどれだけ生み出すのにご苦労されたかというお話を、皆さんご聞きいただいたと思うんですけれども、その今回の話を通してまた皆さん作り手の皆さんに敬意を表しながらまた今日から明日から楽しみながら飲んでいただけることを私たちも祈っております。 皆さん、今日ご参加ありがとうございました。そして最後にアンケートを用意しておりますので、もしお時間あるようでしたら、アンケートへのご回答もご協力いただければ嬉しいです。ありがとうございました。
Thank you very much. Merci beaucoup.
では、ありがとうございました。今日のセミナーを終了いたします。
ありがとうございま
Merci
した。
beaucoup.
あ
Thank
り
you
が
very
とうご
much.
ざいました。
皆様ありがとうございました。
Merci. Thank you so much.
ありがとうございました。
ありがとうございました
また。